Hello and welcome to Dialogue. As the United Nations marks its 80th anniversary, it faces a defining test. Can it reform fast enough to stay relevant in an era of shifting power dynamics and mounting global crises? From climate change to inequality and digital disruption, today's challenges demand a stronger, fairer, and more inclusive multilateral system. How can the UN evolve to meet these expectations? What role can major players like China play in shaping a greener, more cooperative future? And how can countries better practice true multilateralism, safeguard the central role of the United Nations, and promote global governance? To help us answer these questions, I'm glad to be joined by Erik Solheim, former UN Environment Executive Director and UN Under-Secretary General. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue, Erik. Well, this year marks the UN's 80th anniversary, as we said. Secretary General Guterres has launched a wide-ranging reform drive aimed at making the organization more efficient, transparent, and representative of today's multipolar world. Many people see that as a response to mounting criticism. The UN has grown slow, fragmented, and dominated by a few major powers. So in your view, let me start with this problem, your response to those criticism. It's slow, bureaucratic, it's fragmented. Is that fair criticism?
I think yes. Unfortunately, this is a very fair criticism. The UN is the one global institution we really do need. We cannot do without a global organization like the UN. But it needs deep reforms. When it was formed, it was answering the questions of the time. And the founding father of the UN was basically the American president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And it answered very well the questions of that time, which was 1945. Now the UN need to reform to be fit for the 21st century. It must have structural reforms like India becoming the most populous nation in the world, becoming member of the Security Council, European Union representing Europe, not France and UK. Structural reforms are absolutely key. It also needs cultural reform, focusing on results for the people out in the world rather than on procedures in the UN. And it needs leadership reforms, and we'll have an opportunity for a new, much more inspirational leadership when we change the Secretary General next year.
Well, the UN Secretary General mentioned about the shrinking resources. Part of that, let's say, I don't want to name countries, but at least the major economy, like the largest economy in the world, the US. Owed the UN, there's a late payment, for example, contribution to the UN regular budget, and also even the peacekeeping operation, fees is also there's something need to be paid by the US. In what way can we make sure that, of course, on the UN it needs reforms? On the other hand, the members will also pay their share.
I think both is needed. Obviously, the United States cannot go away from its responsibility. It's still the most powerful nation in the world. China may have a bigger economy if you measure it in purchasing power capacity, but the United States is the most powerful military economic power in the world. We definitely need the US to be part of a global solution. But the time where the US could dictate the world, which was most of the 20th century, that's gone. The UN is now a platform where the US can work with China, India, Europe and others to find multilateral solutions which works for everyone. Otherwise, they won't work. 20th century was the US-dominated American century. The 21st century will largely be the Asian century, but it will also be a multilateral century where not one power can dominate the world.
Mm-hmm. We'll speak of global governance. China recently actually mapped out this global governance initiative. And in the words of the UN Secretary General Guterres, he evaluated it as fully in line with the spirit of the UN Charter. In your view, how does this initiative provide a practical way forward, probably amid today's geopolitical division? Do you think initiatives like this could eventually complement or even reshape the existing UN-centered global system?
Absolutely. I think this is a very important positive input from China, and it will drive the global system and the UN in two very positive directions. One is the global south will be front and center. Look, the United States and the West is maybe 15% of the global population, because that 15% cannot direct the rest, which is 85%. And China, with other partners in the global south, will make a true multilateralism. That's one part of this initiative. And the other is to refocus not so much on the procedures, but into what is delivered for the people. How does the African lady at the water pump benefit from the UN? How do the fishermen back home in my nation, Norway, benefit from the UN? How do the automobile worker in Shenzhen in China benefit from the UN? How can we make a global system for health, poverty alleviation, education, infrastructure, which really benefits the people of this world? A much more people-centered, much less procedure-centered UN order.
Yeah, people-centered or sticking to this theme of governance. If you look at the governance inside China, for example, you have spoken highly of China's two mountains idea for reconciling economic growth with environmental protection. First of all, help us understand what is this theory about, especially for viewers overseas.
This goes back to a speech then Party Secretary of Zhejiang Province, Xi Jinping, later of course President of China, made in 2005 in August in a small hillside town called Anji in Zhejiang Province. In English, I think the very easy translation is green is gold. He focused on the enormous opportunities for protecting nature, blue waters and tall mountains are as important as silver as gold, highlighting that if you go green, you can also improve the economy. Look, at that time, China was very polluted. I would never go, say, running in Beijing or any other major city because I didn't want to inhale all that black smoke. Today, I happily do it because China has come so much forward in protecting the air, protecting the water, protecting the soil, and of course become the largest producer of renewable energy in the world. All this has basically happened in 10 years. All of it has happened after President Xi made this enormously important speech in 2005.
We know that it's Belt and Road Initiative by the Chinese side. Primarily, it's about infrastructure projects. Of course, now it's going to a larger extent to include more areas. I know you are the vice president of the BRI International Green Development Coalition. I think one important aspect of the Belt and Road Initiative is the greening of this initiative. And now people see that as a major, important part of this initiative too. Tell us more on that, the green initiative here.
Absolutely. In the early days, there were also a lot of coal and oil and gas investments within Belt and Road. But after President Xi decided that China would stop all overseas coal investment, it was a complete sea change. All green. Belt and Road is now the #1 vehicle for green development in the entire world. Chinese technology and Chinese economic power being deployed in other developing nations. So, for example, CATL just announced a huge investment in electric batteries in Indonesia. BYD has invested in Turkey, in Brazil, in Uzbekistan, in Azerbaijan. Yadea, which is the #1 electric scooter maker, have a huge investment in Vietnam. And I can go on and go on. There's a lot of Chinese foreign investment, and that's of course the vehicle to transform technology. Political meetings cannot change technology.
What do China and the other developing countries do probably to work together to make sure, as you said, it's not about just like an export of Chinese technology, but also it's about localization, production, make countries along the Belt and Road Initiative also part of this industrial chain. So everybody can benefit from the technology, the production, the manufacturing, but also the installation of this clean, like a gadget. And so climate, globalize, and then climate change. Then we will see a change in terms of climate change. I mean, the efforts to improve the situation.
Yeah, China is now the global technology leader in every green area. I mean, batteries, electric cars, metros, high-speed rail, solar, wind, hydropower, hydrogen. Whatever you mentioned, China is the leader on technology, and also when it comes to economic power. However, as I said, I mean, every nation wants jobs in their constituency, and every nation wants to develop their technology. And the best vehicle for this is to see a lot more Chinese foreign investment, as well as China accepting other countries into their own domestic market. China just recently said all African nations are welcome to invest in China, to sell to China without any tariffs. That's a huge positive development, which other countries should follow. Look, China today has a huge trade surplus with nearly every nation in the world, with the United States, that's of course what Trump is focusing on, but with India, with Europe, with Africa, with everyone, because of the enormous efficiency of the Chinese economic system. But that discrepancy cannot just increase and increase and increase. And the only way to solve this, which is that China uses its enormous economic and technological power to invest in other parts of the world, which will help transfer technology and help create jobs also abroad. China is now probably the most innovative nation in the world in nearly all industrial sectors, and also maybe in other sectors like artificial intelligence and more. I mean, no one can copy China. No other nation in the world has the governing system of China. Most other nations in the world, even if they wanted to, they cannot get it because it's an old Chinese system. But they can learn from China.
And if you look at this year, also marks the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. And where are we now, and what we need to do to really make a difference, because we are facing this, let's say, climate change crisis. If we act too slow, and every country and every nation will suffer in this process.
We are not very successful on the diplomatic front. I mean, the agreements which are made after Paris are not very impressive. And of course, the US withdrawal from this system will also make it weaker. However, we are very successful on the economic front, on the practical implementation of new technologies. No one in Paris mentioned that, in the next 10 years, the price of solar energy will fall by 90%. No one thought that possible. And that's, of course, what's driving the change now, that nations go solar. Yes, because they want to live up to the climate commitment, but also, yes, because it's the cheapest energy, and you want to, of course, tap into the cheapest energy which is available. So that the driving force of the change now is not diplomacy, but it's the political economy, renewables becoming both good for the environment and good for the wallet.
Mm-hmm. To further clarify, this is a question from my colleague. If the next climate summit were tomorrow, what one concrete commitment from major economies would make the biggest difference?
I think the most important is that the developed nations should promise to invest more where it's most difficult. Look, going renewable in, say, China or India or Vietnam, that will happen now just because of the forces of the market. But going green in the Central African Republic or Chad or Congo, nations with very weak governments, even sometimes civil wars, you will need a lot more. You will need a lot more use of government mechanism to guarantee for private investment, and also those areas which can only be done by governments, like say protecting people against flooding or against drought. These areas we should see a lot more investment from the developed nation, meaning United States, Europe, Japan, and others.
Let's take a look at China's, again, China's role probably in terms of cutting the emissions. For example, China has recently pledged to cut economy-wide net greenhouse gas emission by 7 to 10% until 2035, in 10 years' time, below its peak, and expand its national carbon emissions trading market to cover high emission sectors. I mean, how big is this move, and what do you see as the biggest obstacle probably to translate such a pledge into measurable, enforceable results?
And this is absolutely massive, and no one thought it possible until very recently. Look, in May month this year, China added nearly 100 gigawatt of solar energy to the grid. How much is that? For example, it's about 20 times the functioning grid in Nigeria, which is the largest nation in Africa. It's about 50 times the private hydropower in Nepal, which is a major hydropower nation. It's 3 times all hydropower we have developed in my nation, Norway. So this is absolutely massive. No one thought it possible. And now China is not doing this, which is good for the people of China and the world. It's also showcasing to the rest of the world that it can happen very, very fast. Fortunately, the other big developer now is India. It's not on par with China, but also India is going very fast in the green direction. Of course, this matters because China and India combined is 37% of the global population. Where it's been much slower is in the US and Europe, because we, at the moment, our political system don't really make it easy for us to build something new.
Well, you are talking about China, India, Europe, the United States. Do you see any, let's say, hope, for the developing world, the developed world to work together and to strengthen their solidarity in the fight against the climate change? I mean, that's at least something in common, the common concern for every country, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a complete no-brainer that we are in the same boat on climate change. I mean, one nation cannot solve this problem alone. If we work together, we are much stronger. But look, whatever is the issue in the 21st century, climate change, environment degradation, wars in Ukraine and Gaza, bringing everyone out of poverty, providing education for all people in the world, avoiding new pandemics, whatever is the issue, we are much more stronger if we work together. Together, humanity is very, very powerful. If we allow ourselves to be divided and get into conflicts, we are much, much weaker. So let's everywhere support those forces who don't see all the negatives of others, but highlight how we can work together.
In terms of the Chinese emission, I guess partly because of the trade disputes, which goes beyond the spills, let's say, into other sectors, including Chinese clean energy or clean technology and the related products. Some have pointed to the fact that China remains the largest emitter of the world. I mean, how big an issue is that? How do you look at that? Will China, as we earlier mentioned, so is China on track to continue to reduce emission based on your observation?
I think nearly all observers believe that China just passed the peak emissions and that the emissions will now go down. And they will go down because the enormous speed of the rollout of solar and wind and hydropower in China. Solar is the main driver, but wind and hydropower and all the others are also a very critical part of this. And the rollout is massive, mainly, of course, in western part of China, in Xinjiang, in Qinghai, Gansu, these provinces, where there's a huge amount of, in the Mongolia, of available land. Because a huge solar plant, you can basically not build in, say, Jiangsu province, because there is no available land. So it will have to be in the west, and then grid lines will provide energy to the more populous eastern part of China. But through doing this in China, not only China do good to the world, but it also provides lessons for other nations as to what they can do better. People should look to China. I mean, no one can copy China. No other nation in the world has the governing system of China. Most other nations in the world Even if they wanted to, they cannot get it because it's an old Chinese system. But they can learn from China, from the leadership of the President Xi Jinping, that's important, from the efficiency of their governance system. And of course, it also helps China that it has such a huge market. So if you are successful in that market, it tends to be globally successful.
Well, that's true. At least one thing I think, China attaches great importance to, say, environment protection, climate change. The Chinese leader personally called that as ecological civilization. He elevated that issue to a civilization level. That's so critical. That's why, that's how important it is, for the government, for the public, and for all related parties to work together, in that direction. If you look at the 14th five-year plan, which ends this year, during this period, China built the world's largest clean energy system and saw explosive growth in new energy vehicles. Of course, this is, as you said, massive achievements. But which aspect of China's green process, policy design, scale of investment, or innovation do you think deserves more international recognition?
I think maybe people should be more aware of the political leadership because that's absolutely key. Some other nations tend to focus on whatever they disagree with in China rather than to focus on what they can learn from China. President Xi is speaking about the environment all the time. He visits high-tech green factories, he goes to national parks, he went to Guangdong to the mangroves, just to highlight the importance of the environment to the people of China. And he does it in very easily understandable slogans like ecological civilization or beautiful China to protect the beauty of the land. I would want to see European leaders being as engaged as President Xi in this area. That will help the development in Europe or in many other parts of the world tremendously. But of course, that leadership is only meaningful if it leads to innovation, to large-scale industrial developments. But that is what we are seeing now. China is now probably the most innovative nation in the world in nearly all industrial sectors, and also maybe in other sectors like artificial intelligence and more.
We'll speak of innovation and also the five-year plan. We know that the fourth plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee reviewed and outlined proposals for the 15th five-year plan. That means the next 5 years from 2026, placing greater emphasis on developing new quality productive forces tailored to local strength and conditions. Of course, people expect this will, accelerate green innovation and sustainable growth. Are we going to see, wider global effect of the Chinese green innovation? I guess both inside and outside China.
Absolutely. Look, in the first about 3 or 4 decades of reform and opening up in China, led from the beginning by Deng Xiaoping, the focus was entirely on economic growth. Growth to bring everyone out of poverty, which was understandable at the time. Then came President Xi and he said, yes, we want growth, but we want a more people-centered growth and we want a more high-tech growth. And that's changed everything. And now China is also in the lead in basically every sector in innovation and science and research. So this is a different form for growth from the early days of Chinese modernization. And I think the most interesting point maybe of the next 5-year plan will be how China integrates information technology, artificial intelligence with the green sectors. Of course, artificial intelligence can play an absolute critical role in, for instance, making the the energy system a lot more efficient, much less waste, much better products, and it can make the cars self-run or autonomous. There will be any number of potential gains in the mixture of IT, artificial intelligence revolution on one side and the green revolution on others. And I think everyone in the rest of the world will look out for what China is doing in these areas.
Well, as China aims to peak its carbon dioxide emission by 2030, which sectors demand the boldest policy, and what obstacles stand in the way, given the rise of AI, as we mentioned, data centers and digital industries. Do you think China's carbon peak timetable will need adjustment in terms of the industries there?
I think some of the key issues are basically the same, whether you are in China or Europe or the United States or wherever. You need to bring people along. Look, I visited in Xinjiang, the largest solar plant in the world. Well, it's just outside Urumqi. It's absolutely wonderful, but it's not small and cozy. You see solar panels to the horizon. So unless you work with the local people, how they can have benefits of these kind of massive investments, they will tend to be critical. And that you see in many other parts of the world, people don't want windmills because they don't see the benefits in their lives. So I think that dialogue with local people, making sure that the windfalls from solar and wind goes to local people is absolutely critical, because all this demands a huge amount of land. And to make the green revolution fair is essential. I mean, in the Chinese context, make sure it doesn't just benefit the young and trendy in, say, Jiangsu or Guangdong, but also the old farmer in Henan or the coal worker in Shanxi. And if you turn to the United States, it cannot just benefit Texas and California, it must benefit Kentucky or West Virginia. In Europe, it cannot just benefit people in Paris and Berlin, it must benefit people in the countryside of Poland also. These issues of politics are the most important. We have all the technologies we need, we have all the money we need, but we sometimes struggle to make the politics right, and then people will turn against the Green Revolution.
Well, with that, we come to the end for today's show. Many thanks to Mr. Erik Solheim. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.